I had originally titled my talk, A Wiki, an Ontology, and a Knowledge Graph Walk into a Bar when I submitted it, thinking I would have some clever and hilarious anecdote about a conversation in a bar. However, all conversations have now turned to what it used to be like to have conversations in a bar, and we are all drinking remotely on Zoom meetings, so cheers. I'm Ahren Lehnert, the Senior Manager of Text Analytics Solutions at Synaptica. For over 25 years, Synaptica has provided innovative software solutions for building and managing controlled vocabularies including taxonomies, thesauri, and ontologies. For concision, I've narrowed down my life timeline to 3 events and listed some likes and dislikes. Those 3 events are, of course, I was born, I became a taxonomist, and now I'm talking to you, which is all that really matters for this conference. You can also follow or contact me at any of the methods listed below. So I started 2020, as many of you might have done, thinking it was going to be a fantastic year. I foolishly asked 2020 to show me what you got. What 2020 had, however, was at least one global, national, or personal catastrophe per month. One of the few pieces of good news was that N95 masks work well for overlapping catastrophes like COVID-19 and the wildfire smoke we had in the San Francisco Bay Area. As I mentioned, I was going to frame my presentation around the well-worn bar and trio joke cycles, but then 2020 walked into a bar, set it on fire, called in a drone strike, spread an infectious disease, crashed the economy, protested, set it on fire again, called in hurricanes and wildfires, and we still have 2 more months to go. With all this doom and gloom, what good has come out of 2020? Well, there is a bright side. Despite the many disasters of 2020, there's a bright side for knowledge management. Remote, distributed knowledge management is becoming the norm, and remote working has reinforced the need for knowledge management functions, such as remote access to content and collaborative working. Without the ability to ask someone at the water cooler or down at the hall, access to enterprise content has become essential for remote workers. Leaders are looking to knowledge management professionals for guidance on processes and technologies to support remote work, such as collaboration and knowledge management tools, including how best to organize and access this content. Therefore, they are more likely to support KM infrastructure projects. Well, at least we hope they are. While we'd all like to retire to the Winchester, have a pint, and wait for this all to blow over, it's up to professionals like us to lead the way on remote working, including the organization and access to content. So prior to and including this year, we have been working with our client to provide them ontology management software. And this use case is a great example of being able to create, organize, and retrieve content, whether in the office or remotely. The client faced challenges with outdated content, which was difficult to find through browse or search. In addition, there was no way to discover new content, and users would recreate existing content because it could not be found. Taxonomy management was inefficient and included many concepts which were simply not valuable to the business. The client required a centralized vocabulary management software platform to provide standardized concepts across a decentralized global organization to find, browse, and discover content. They needed the ability to push vocabularies out to consuming systems and users while also allowing users to suggest new concepts without requiring them to log in to the taxonomy management software. The client wanted to be able to manage the vocabulary centrally, while integrating with numerous homegrown and commercially available systems and content repositories, including the content management systems Confluence and SharePoint. To fully realize their goals, the company also needed customized solutions in the taxonomy management software and connectors to external systems. Their guiding principles for control vocabularies were to use ontologies to drive user experience, such as search, browse, and discovery, while using taxonomies for the metadata schemes for content creators to tag by topic and language, and taxonomy editors to manage the governance process by status. Our client uses Graphite for ontology management in addition to the dedicated Confluence and SharePoint connectors. Knowledge models or schemes from Graphite are available for tagging wiki pages in Confluence through the dedicated Confluence connector. Content creators working in Confluence tag pages with the appropriate scheme concepts and are allowed to suggest concepts in the same user interface. In our client's workflow, they allow users to choose the target scheme for the concept. These concepts are then stored in the target scheme in Graphite in the candidate status and can then be reviewed by a dedicated team of ontologists. Users can submit candidates to a staging scheme before ontologist development, and move them to the appropriate schemes using the transfer concept feature. The ontologists use workflow status as part of their governance process to move concepts from suggested candidate to approval to published and available for tagging. In addition to the out-of-the-box graphite functionality, the client required bespoke work on the system as well as the connectors. Within graphite, the client required advanced concept, scheme, and project visualization, additional batch editing features, the ability to filter concepts by status within the hierarchies, and flexibility to move one or more concepts across schemes. In Confluence, the ability to tag pages with existing and suggested concepts, filter available concepts by status and collections, copy and move pages and tags, and see all pages tagged with the same concepts were customized improvements to help the client realize their concept workflow and governance goals. Finally, specific additions to the SharePoint connector so schemes would align between Graphite and SharePoint term sets ensured client vocabularies could be reused across systems. The application of control vocabulary concepts as metadata to content allows the client to improve browse, search, and discovery experiences on the front end within the organization. Users can browse internal content based on the metadata and see content grouped by key topics. Synaptica's ability to gather the client's requirements, plan a workable project plan and schedule, and deliver the solutions on time and on budget allowed our client to meet their internal timelines and expand the use of control vocabularies across the organization and plan for additional future projects. So you may have heard about the 3 pillars within the enterprise: people, process, and technology. For knowledge management and the categorization of content, I've identified some of these people, processes, and technology relating to this area. Some of the processes involved in knowledge management infrastructure capable of supporting a knowledge graph are content management, taxonomy governance, knowledge management, and of course software development. Of course, people are the backbone of working towards creating a knowledge graph. You need content creators and managers, knowledge management specialists, taxonomists, information architects, and subject matter experts. These lists are not exhaustive, but they are roles essential to sustaining a knowledge management infrastructure, whether on-premise or remote. Finally, the technologies required to support a knowledge graph are content and digital asset management systems, internet platforms, taxonomy and ontology management software, search tools, and possibly auto-categorization, among others. Each of these roles and each of these areas somehow factor into our use case we will walk through. So let's talk a little bit about the architecture. Some of the key components in our architecture are represented here in this diagram. An ontology management system. In this case, since we are a vendor, this is Graphite with its underlying graph database, GraphDB by Ontotext. We also require read-write REST-based API web services for connecting to external systems. Now, we have dedicated connectors to SharePoint and Confluence, which are purpose-built based on client requirements. Other enterprise applications can also be connected to a centralized vocabulary management system such as Graphite for a hub-and-spoke model in which control vocabulary concepts are centrally managed for use in multiple enterprise systems such as content and digital asset management systems, search, and even product information management systems. Part of an overall taxonomy governance process is a role-based permissions set allowing taxonomy administrators to create and manage projects, permissions, and taxonomies and their concepts while taxonomy editors and subject matter experts review taxonomy concepts and provide additional information, provided informational attributes and relationships. You'll see in our demo how the governance template allows the application of specific fields to concepts for use by these roles. As an additional step in governance, we can pre-populate templates with relationships appropriate to mapping concepts from one scheme to another, whether the concepts are the same or related. In this case, we're using standard SCOS and OWL relationships to perform mapping, but we can create any custom relationships of any type within the system. So let's talk a little bit too about the knowledge graph. Before we get into our demo, let's explain that the combination of these content sources included in our use case really constitute a knowledge graph, which is the application of an ontology to a set of individual data points. In this case, our ontologies are structures populated with concepts in Graphite, an ontology management system in its backend graph database, GraphDB, and our data points include content in Confluence, videos from YouTube, and linked data resources from DBpedia. So we're going to move on to a demonstration combining people, which are roles and permissions, processes of content creation, content management, and taxonomy governance, and technology, Confluence as a content management system, and Graphite as a taxonomy and ontology management system. And these are all a means of showing the real-life client use case. So I'm going to switch over to Graphite and make sure I'm still logged in, and I am. So let's start here in Graphite. Actually, we're going to start over here in Confluence. So in our first scenario and cycle of the process, let's say I'm a knowledge worker and content creator who is creating pages in Confluence. Now I've just added a page about climate change. I want to tag the page with appropriate concepts provided by Graphite through a connector developed for Confluence. So as I scroll through this page here, we'll see that I've set this up that I have page content about climate change. I also have a video that I've embedded that I can play. So let me say that I want to tag this page, and the concepts are held in Graphite. They're two publicly available vocabularies, one of which is called GEMIT, which is the General Multilingual Environmental Thesaurus, and the UNESCO Thesaurus. Both provide general topic concepts, including topics about the environment. In this case, only concepts which are part of the collection environmental issues, and we'll see that back in Graphite, and are in the approved status are available for tagging in the Has GEMIT topic. So if I click on my icon here, this is my tagging pane, and only concepts that are in the approved status are available for tagging in the Has GEMIT topic relationship and the Has UNESCO topic relationship fields, because they've been constrained via the API connection to Graphite. So in the Has GEMIT topic field, I'm going to tag this page with a few topics around climate change. I'm going to pick drought. I am also going to pick environmental management. Now I can also browse for these terms, but I can use the type ahead as well. If I wanted to browse for terms, I could go in here and I could start looking for those terms that way. So let's go to the Has UNESCO topic field. I'm going to type in climate change, since that's what this is about. I'm also going to add permafrost. I'm going to add the topic of pollution. And I'm going to add the topic of human activities effects. There we are. Okay. And I also want to tag it with a term, Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. Now when I start typing here, I see that this does not exist. And so this goes to the heart of our client wanting to be able to add terms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add the term I want, and hopefully I'll spell it right. Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And I'm going to put in the acronym here too, right in the, and if I click the plus here, so once I enter the name of that concept and I start to type the term, I find that I don't have it. So I enter the name of the concept and I click the plus icon, and that will suggest the term in Graphite in the candidate status. Now you can see there that it's already been applied to the page without approval, but that's part of my workflow. I can propose it, and then the ontologist on the back end can review it. So once the concepts are tagged to the page, you can hover over each term and you'll show information. Now notice that there's no information about this term because I just added it, but some of the ones that already existed, I can see things like a definition, I can see alternative terms. This one has a couple alternative labels. Here I've got a description, and this is coming from a linked data source. When I click on this linked data source, I will be taken out to DBpedia to the page about climate change. So you can see I'm starting to bring in external information as well as the tags that I've tagged the page with. So in our next scenario, let's say I'm an editorial reviewer and taxonomist, and now I'll go to Graphite, and I'm working in Graphite. I'm an editor, or I'm an ontologist, and my task is to review new candidate concepts which are related to my subject matter work. So one way to do this is simply to navigate to information. So I go to the recently created climate change page and I can review it. Notice I have this scheme here, Topics Confluence Pages. This is literally the page that I created. And when I click on this and open it up, you'll see that the topics that, that me in another role or this other role as a content creator tagged this page with. You could see that it has a URL which links out to that page. And then I also have the tags that I tag that page with. So I could literally go through here and say, okay, I see a new page has been created. Let's look at these terms, and I could do it that way. Of course, I don't have additional information here, so going this route is a little more time consuming. It doesn't show me quite all the information I want. I'd have to sort of know, yeah, which one of these terms already existed and which ones are new. So a better way to do this, really, is to find the concepts that I need to review by using search. So if I go to my search tab, and I look for terms in the candidate state, and I'm going to limit that to the scheme of, I'm going to limit it to I'm going to put both schemes actually, but I am going to limit it by date. So I'm going to say that it was created on, and let's start with the beginning of the week. I'm recording this in advance of the conference, obviously, so I'm gonna pick today, and then, well, I'll move it back a day, and then I'll pick through today. So any new candidate concept should show up. So when I run my search, okay, I find that there's only been one candidate term in the last 2 days, yesterday and today, that time range that I put in. So here's my candidate term, and I can look at this term and decide how I now want to populate it, because I'm the subject matter expert working in graphite. So I am going to put this somewhere, and if I know my thesaurus and I know the terms that are in there, I can say, well, this really needs to go under intergovernmental organizations. So I start my typing. I find my term, I tag it with my term. Okay. I also decide that as I'm working in this concept that I do not want this as part of the label. So I'm going to get rid of that, and I'm going to say, well, I want it as an alt label. So I'm going to add it as my alternative label. Okay. And because I have a governance template applied to this concept, there are properties and relationships used exclusively for review purposes. So I'm going to say that, yeah, I reviewed this. I'm not adding much else to it right now. And then I'll say that I reviewed this, reviewed on, well, 2020, 11/9, today's date. And also, I'm going to add a definition for from DBpedia, and I have the URL here already, so I'm just going to throw that in and save the properties. So that's me working in one single concept, and you can see that I've populated a broader term, I have added the description, I've added an alt label, and I've said that, yeah, I've marked this to true, I've reviewed this. So one of the things that makes this workflow possible that I mentioned before is a governance template I set up in Graphite. So if I go to my template admin and I go to my functional templates, you'll see that I've got a governance template here that I set up. And basically this is a collection of properties and relationships that I've gathered together in this template that I can apply to a concept and then make those concepts or make those fields and relationships available. The same thing with the mapping template, where I've used all things from OWL and SCOS, and I have gone through and I have said, here's all these mapping relationships that I want to include, and I can apply that to one or more concepts back in the vocabularies. So I have another task for today. I'm going to go back to my concept manager here. I am going to demote the term global warming and use climate change as the preferred term. So I don't want to delete the old concept, but I do want to keep it for reference. So I'm going to search for the term climate change. I'll put that in exactly, so I limit my search here a little bit, but I'm just going to do a quick search, so it'll bring several things back. And I find my term climate change, and I am going to, I've got a replaces field that I've added. And again, that's part of that mapping so that I can map concepts between each other. So here I'm going to say, I know there's a term out there called global warming, and I'm going to add that as the term from the same thesaurus. You can see it exists in both. I'm just going to add it from the UNESCO thesaurus and say that it has replaced that term. And then I can go to my, I still have this field for subject matter expert comments, and I can say added global warming in the replaces field, just so I have some notes on what happened. I could put a date in there, but this is all tracked in an audit log as well. And I could move this to QC review true and save those properties. And there I've mapped two concepts, and it's basically replacing, I'm replacing the old concept with the new concept. So in my final scenario, I'm an administrator who wants to approve any concepts which have been reviewed. So I go back to my search tab, and I can run a search. I am going to go to the advanced search tab, and I am going to search by a property, and that property is that QC review. And I am going to say that anything that's a QC review property that's been marked true, in other words, some editorial ontologist, somebody working graphite, has marked these to true to say they're ready to be reviewed. I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to search for those terms. So any of the concepts, and you can see those two concepts that I marked as true, have been are here, and they're marked ready for they've been reviewed, and so I can pick these terms and decide, well, I want both of these concepts to now be, I trust that my editor has done his or her job, and they have reviewed these concepts. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mark them both as approved. So in this batch editor, you can do, just as it's called, you can make batch edits. You can add relationships, you can add definitions, you can change properties, you can mark a whole bunch of things to the same status, which I'm doing here, and I'm going to save those. So now those are approved. So when I go back and I sort of refresh my page here, and I look at this climate change page, now I had already added that concept, intergovernmental panel. If I remove that, if I take that off of there by clicking on my my editor panel, remember it didn't exist before, and only concepts that are marked true or are marked approved should appear here. And actually, that's something I forgot to do. If I go to this concept, I'm going to have to add it to the collection or it's not going to appear. I have to add this to the environmental issues and save it. And then I'll go back here, I'll refresh my page. Otherwise, it won't appear. I've got a filter on this that won't allow concepts that aren't approved and that are in that collection to appear. So I won't find it unless I go mark them with those two things. So now I can search for it, and there it is. So you can see that there's a full round trip here between somebody suggesting a term, an editor suggesting a term, a reviewer reviewing these concepts, then them being approved and adding the collections, and then being made available for tagging back on the front end. So you really get a full round trip governance process here of content creation and tagging. So go back to my slides here. So in summary, whether you're in person or remote, as many of us are remote right now, knowledge workers should be able to create new content, tag that content with existing taxonomy concepts, suggest new concepts as subject matter experts, and find those tags available for their use within a reasonable amount of time. Likewise, taxonomists and ontologists should be able to see the kind of content being produced and support content creators with centralized, controlled vocabulary management concepts, which aid those workers in finding existing content and discovering new content. Where ontologies and content come together from internal and external sources to create a knowledge graph, there should be governance processes supporting this content and taxonomy management. So I just want to say thank you very much. I hope to see all of you in person in the future. To learn more about Synaptica's products and services, you could please visit our website or contact us by email at info@synaptica.com, and I will make these slides available so you can contact me directly too. Again, thanks very much. Thanks for tuning in, and stay safe out there.